Hello there, it's Sarah from Paper Lovely. Thanks for joining me today. I am back with part 2 using the Close to My Heart Hawthorn card kit. If you missed part 1, you want to check out the video that I posted yesterday, which was an unboxing of the kit, as well as taking you through the instructions, showing you how to cut everything to get the most out of your pattern paper. So I went ahead and did the first 3 designs, which are included in with the instructions that come with the kit. And today I'm going to be using my leftovers to create 5 more designs for you. So I have jumped in here to card number 4, and I started off by stamping out that "Thanks so much" sentiment. I'm using the Saffron ink. And then I have also stamped out 2 of the pine cones using that same Saffron ink. Here I've pulled in the charcoal and I'm going to stamp out this little cluster. So I've gone ahead here and trimmed all of those out using the coordinating dies, and I'm going to start placing my card together. This back panel here is the full front of an A2 sized card, so that gray measures 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. The blue pattern paper measures 5 by 3 3/4. This yellow stripe measures 4 1/4 by 1 inch. And then that smaller paprika stripe measures 4 1/4 by 3/4 of an inch. So I'm just going to layer all of these down here, making sure I get those nice and straight. I will tear about 1 inch off of that paprika strip. Here I'm just double checking my layout. I'll add some ATG and get that placed down as well. I'll add some ATG to the back of my cluster. Then I'm going to pop each of these pine cones up with some 1/4 inch Scotch foam tape. Go ahead and get those layered down. And then I'll also pop up my sentiment using that same foam tape. Lastly, I'll add some ATG to the back of my panel and place that down on top of my card base. Now you see my panel there is just slightly smaller than that card base, so I just made sure that the top and the side edges measured or fit perfectly, and then I'm just going to trim a little bit off of either edge to make sure that I don't have that white sticking out. And that's going to complete card number 4. Here for card number 5, I'm working directly on a Neenah card base, and I've trimmed down this pattern paper. The blue is 4 1/4 by 1.5 inches, and the paprika is 4 1/4 by 1/4 of an inch. Adding some ATG behind both of those and placing them down at the bottom here. And I'll go ahead and trim off that excess. Once again, that blue pattern paper there is just slightly shorter than the edge of my card base, so I'm going to go ahead and just trim a sliver of that off there. And then I decided I wanted to stamp my cluster directly on the top of my card base, so I'm going to pull out my Saffron ink and my stamp block. Just figuring out how I want my positioning to be there. I'll go ahead and ink that up really well. And stamp that down. Just letting that sit and pressing firmly to make sure that that ink will soak into the cardstock. Next, I'm going to grab my charcoal ink and I'm going to stamp out the sentiment, "Thanks so much." I am using the lighter side of the charcoal paper. And I've gone ahead and trimmed that out using the banner die. I'm going to add some 1/4 inch foam tape behind that. And here you'll see I've got some of the smaller elements trimmed out. I did stamp these previously, but I'm going to use one that's stamped in Paprika and then a double stamp of that, or shadow stamp, to give me that lighter pink color. And then I've done the same thing with the acorn, shadow stamping that, so I have a darker and a lighter version. You'll see in one of the later cards I pull in that paper so you can see how I've stamped and shadow stamped all of the different colors. So I've taken some foam tape and popped each of those up. I'm going to go ahead and place that down on top of the cluster. And then I'll peel away the backing on my sentiment and place that down as well. Lastly, I have got a bow off to the side there that I've tied using the twine. I'm going to grab one of those 3M glue dots. I was also using those in the previous video. They are left over from an old paper pumpkin pack. And I'll just use a needle to pull that off. I'm going to place that right in the center of those 3 popped up elements. And then I will take the knot of my bow and stick that down right in the center there. And that will complete card number 5. For card number 6, I'm going to use this rock and roll technique again. So I'm just going to take my cluster here, ink that up really well in that saffron ink, and then I will just roll the edges of the stamp on the paprika. So I will get a mix of a dark orange sort of fading into that yellow in the center. I'm going to go ahead and do this twice. For my sentiment, I'm going with "So Blessed to Have You," and I'm going to stamp this with paprika right on top of the lighter side of that paprika cardstock. Then lastly here, I'm going to take that pine cone and stamp that out using the charcoal ink. And there you can see some of that secondary stamping that I've done with all of the different colors of the inks. I've trimmed everything out with the coordinating dies, and there I'm getting everything laid out. So this bottom panel is again the same size as my A2 size card front, and that is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. I've then trimmed down this white to 2 3/4 by 4 inches, and the gray on top to 2 1/2 by 3 3/4. The yellow stripe measures 4 1/4 by 1 inch. So I've layered those two together there, added some foam tape behind, and I'm going to center this on my base panel. I then went ahead and measured just using my pencil so I knew where the edges of this were going to be popped up off to the side of that panel. So I'm just going to add 1 layer of foam tape so I can keep that even. And I'll center that there as best as I can. I've grabbed some of the twine and I'm going to add a little bit of ATG just in the center there, behind where that yellow stripe is. Then I'm going to add this twine in sort of an X shape. So I'm just going to wrap that around twice around the front, and I'll secure the edges on the back there. Next, I'm going to get my clusters laid out. So I wanted these to somewhat overlap so that they would be underneath the sentiment. So I'm just getting everything lined up here, making sure I have those in the right position. And then again, because I have that popped up panel in the center, I'm going to have to add some foam tape. So I'm just going to add one strip of that 1/4 inch at the top and bottom of each of the clusters. Then I will go ahead and add some ATG just to make sure they stay down nice and tight. Peel away that backing and place down the first one. And then I'll place down the second one. Tried to keep them as much of a mirror image as I could. I'm just going to trim off that excess that's hanging over the edge there. I'm going to add some foam tape to the back of my sentiment. Because I have that X of the twine in the center there, I didn't want to add the foam tape on top of that, so I'm just going to add a little piece on either end. And again, I'll trim off some little pieces to place behind the pine cones. I'll peel away the backing on everything and get those popped down in place. Lastly, I'm going to grab my Nuvo shimmer pen and I'm going to run that over top of the pine cones. First I'm going to add some ATG and I will place my panel down on top of my card base. Then I will pull in that Nuvo. If you decide to use the shimmer pen, I just want to let you know that this ink is water-based. So when you add the shimmer, it is going to have it run just a little bit. If you want the nice crisp dark color, you definitely don't want to add the shimmer. But I was actually really happy with the way that this sort of faded and it gave it sort of a watercolored look, which I really liked, and I thought it went really well with the fading that I had done with the yellow and the orange with the rock and roll stamping technique. And of course it had some shimmer. And that will finish up card number 6. For card number 7, I wanted to do again that secondary stamping, so I have pulled out my cluster and the Paprika ink, and I'm going to go ahead and stamp this once. I will really quickly pull that up and place that down once again. I have found that with the secondary stamping, the quicker you pull that up, the more ink is left and the more solid of an image you can get. So especially with something that has details like this, you want to stamp that first one real quick, pull it up, and then place it down right away. I'm also going to grab my charcoal ink and stamp out 2 more of those pine cones. I've gone ahead and trimmed everything out, and I'm going to get my card put together here. So this yellow panel measures 5.5 by 3.5. And then I've got a blue strip which measures 4.25 by 1/2 inch. And a gray strip that is 4.25 by 1/4 inch, adding some ATG behind both of those, and I will get that down in place. Off to the side there, you'll see I have a sentiment, grateful for you. I had actually pulled this off of another card that I had made, but I didn't really like it in the end, so I'm just going to reuse that, which is why it already has the foam tape behind it. Gonna go ahead and trim off that excess there. And then I will get my cluster laid out. I'll add some ATG to the back of that, place it down. Then I'm gonna add a little more ATG to the back of that foam tape, just to make sure that stays down nice and tight since it had already been stuck down and pulled up once. I'll add a couple of little dots of foam tape behind each of these pine cones and then place those down as well. And then I'm going to pull in 3 more of the acorns. And again, 2 of these are from a previous card, so they do already have some foam tape behind them. I've used the paprika and then a secondary of the paprika to make that pink, and then the saffron for the yellow. And once I'm happy with the placement, I will go ahead and peel away the backing and place each of those down. Once again, I'm going to grab that Nuvo shimmer pen and just run that over top of my pine cones. And that will complete card number 7. For the last card, I'm going to start out by stamping some yellow pine cones. And then if you take a look at the blue pattern paper, it has a really pretty green julep toned pine cone running through it. And I wanted to pull in my julep ink pad from my stash. If you've watched any of my previous Close to My Heart videos, you know that julep is the color of the year. So this is going to be a theme throughout the next year of their pattern papers. This julep is really going to blend with all of them. So I wanted to do one sentiment with that, and I decided to stamp out "Thanks so much." So I have gone ahead and trimmed everything out with the coordinating dies. I am using for my cluster, that is the very first stamping that I did with that paprika for the last card. So I just went ahead and trimmed that out. Here I've got some pattern paper, and this is going to end up measuring 4 1/4 by 3 1/2. And then the gray measures 4 1/4 by 2 inches. I'm just going to center these. Oh, I did put the yellow down first. This is 5/8 of an inch wide, and I'm not quite sure how long it was. I just placed that down and then made sure that my gray would cover it up on the edge. So it looks to be, it's probably maybe a little over 4 inches there. I'm going to place that gray down in the center of my blue and then trim off that excess. And I'll get my cluster down in place. Just making sure I have everything where I'd like it to be. I'll add some ATG to the back. And place that down. And then I will pop up my pine cones and my sentiments with that foam tape. Now once I had the banner down, I felt like this still needed a little something more, so I am going to pull in one of those secondary stamps of that acorn in that pretty pink color. I popped that up with some foam tape, and I'll place that down as well. And that'll complete card number 8. Here are a few close-ups of the finished cards. In the description box below, you'll find my blog post, which has additional photos and links to the supplies I used. If you enjoyed the video, please leave me a comment or a thumbs up and subscribe for more. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.